and welcome to Inside the Admissions Office, the official podcast of Ingenious Prep and your go-to resource for expert admission strategy. My name is Jillian, and I'm excited to be your guide through this wild ride of college admissions. Each episode, I'll bring you insights from former admissions officers who know the ins and outs of getting into your dream school and their firsthand experiences reviewing applications. Our strategies have helped countless students gain acceptance to top universities, and we're here to help your students gain that competitive edge and do the same. Whether you are just starting your college prep journey or knee-deep in applications, we've got you covered. So grab your notebooks, pencils, and maybe a cup of coffee. Let's dive in. Hi everyone, welcome back to Inside the Admissions Office. We've got a fascinating episode for you today as we explore the powerful role of executive functioning, the skills that help your child manage time, stay organized, and achieve success. We will cover the essentials of what is executive functioning, why it's so important for your child's growth, and how to recognize the signs when your child might need extra support. Plus, we'll be dropping some expert-approved strategies you can use to help your child boost their executive functioning skills starting today. And with the influence of technology in everyday life, we'll dive into how it affects executive functioning and what you can do to keep it in check. This episode is perfect for parents, teachers, and anyone invested in helping children reach their full potential. And to top it all off, we have Dr. Anna Levy Warren from Organizational Tutors with us today to share her expertise, like this one.
One of the most common things I see for parents when you send kids out the door is you say, get ready for school. There are 10 to 20 instructions embedded in get ready for school. And when many kids who have these kinds of executive functioning challenges, they don't hold those 20 things in mind. So when you say that, you get a ton of frustration and a ton of miss. And really what's so important is to make sure that you're spelling those things out until they're fully internalized and not leaping over that step.
And this.
But really most important to me as a parent and as an educator is thinking about the manifestation of those challenges and thinking about how you customize an approach that really thinks about that particular kid's profile. So some of the things I've said are utilized in that kind of thinking about ADHD. But really that's where those daily visual schedules, timed work sessions, like countdowns, the Pomodoro technique, all those things become really important when you're dealing with kids who have those kinds of complex diagnostic profiles.
All right, we have a great episode ahead, so let's jump right in. Hi, Anna. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Before we get started, could you give us a quick introduction and share a little bit about your background with our listeners?
Of course. My name is Anna Levy Warren. I have my PhD in clinical psychology, which I received from the City University of New York after attending Princeton. And before that, Dalton School in New York City and Bank Street before that, all which feel really relevant to my experience. I'm a born and raised New Yorker, and I have been running a few companies at the intersection of psychology and education for about 20 years.
For our listeners who may not be familiar with the term, can you provide a comprehensive definition of executive functioning and explain why it is so crucial for a child's development?
Sure. So executive functioning is, let's be honest, it's not actually a fully agreed upon term. So lots of different descriptions in the literature, but ultimately it's a set of interrelated cognitive processes that are meant to describe, it's an umbrella term, and it's really meant to describe a set of goal-directed behaviors. So it's like the air traffic control of the brain, delegating, managing, sending out information when needed. And it really has a few key components. And my colleague, Dr. Vivian Mujios, I think does a great job really capturing these in her book, which is called Action Potential, which I'm happy to share more about. But really it's about working memory, which is the ability to hold and manipulate information over short periods. It's like the Post-it note system in your brain. I also like to think about it like a server at a restaurant, that the people who look at you and are like, give me your order. And you say, I'm gluten-free and dairy-free and hold the fries. And they like look at you and I got it. You think, do they actually have it? But they do. That's their working memory. And then inhibitory control is the ability to control impulses and resist distractions. And then there's cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to adapt to changing circumstances or switch between tasks, which is another. So all those things are really key components of executive functioning. And that's what we're talking about when we're referring to that term. Oh, and you asked me about crucial for a child's development. And that's really because if you think about it, it's really about the approach and process in learning. So in order to learn, you need to be able to do all those things, like even to be able to listen in class and think about what's important versus unimportant. important, to follow multi-step directions. It's also really crucial for regulating emotions, which is very important if you want to learn. It promotes independence, right? A capacity to get from one place to another. It builds resilience. And it's really about improving behavioral control as well. So our capacity to sit and do one thing versus all the other things we're not doing is a part of executive functioning. So it really lays the foundation for long-term success, both academically and just in life and process.
That is really fascinating. Now I'm curious, at what age do children typically begin to develop executive functioning skills, and how do these skills evolve as they grow? Are there key developmental milestones parents should be aware of?
Yes, there's from the beginning of life, right? Like even in infancy and toddlerhood, we begin to see the emergence of like basic executive function. So in working memory, like recognizing and remembering people and objects, that's something we want to see, or being able to exhibit basic self-control. So attending to one task and not going to grab your pacifier or your video game, right? Like you're choosing to do something. And then a capacity to adapt to new routines, like even going to another kid's house and playing with their toys and following their rules. And even from the beginning, you can start to see differences. So I have 3 children of my own. My daughter actually has pretty severe ADHD, which means that she has executive functioning challenges. And from the age of 2, I could tell that there was a difference in just the way she could get in and out of a house or manage her stuff. And she just was attending to things differently, and it wasn't a linear way of thinking. So there's a real way that you can almost from the beginning start to see that. Now in preschool and when your kids get to school, you actually are starting to see even more development, right? They need to know multi-step directions. Like everyone hang up your backpack and your coat, put your shoes away, right? You need to be able to do that, or be able to wait and take turns in games. And then in early childhood, there needs to be more planning and organizing and more task initiation. And by the time you get to the age of 7, we really expect emotion regulation, right? You don't expect tantruming and outbursts in the middle of a class when you don't like the way your teacher says a thing, or another kid might bump you. You don't want a kid who has a verbal outburst. So you can just see this sort of developmental movement. And then in middle school, it's working memory significantly. It should really leap, because that's where we're getting to like complex problem solving, longer instructions in both written and verbal forms. And our inhibitory control, we really want people to resist distractions and control their impulses at a whole new level, right? Middle schoolers really need to be able to get their work done differently. And even time management starts to develop at this age. We want to really internalize time, not just be introduced to what a clock is, but feel time moving and understand how it goes from how one thing takes longer, how you take longer doing different things. And then with cognitive flexibility, we're really seeing problem solving differently, right? We really want to be able to apply a strategy in a new way by the time we get to middle school. And then just to keep going with it a little bit, by adolescence, then you want a maturation of all these skills. And you imagine by adulthood, that 18 to 25, which is that full range of executive functioning wise and brain wise, when we want to see adulting happening, we get to really complex decision making. You want to be able to manage a calendar. You want to be able to get to your multiple tasks. You want to get your work done. So you can see how this really develops over time, but it's starting to develop from the very early years.
That's so great to know, and thank you for such a detailed explanation. Could you walk us through a list of executive functioning skills that are essential for success in both younger children and teenagers? How do these skills impact their academic performance, social interactions, and overall well-being?
The thing of EF skills that really come to mind for me are planning and organizing. And so that's a capacity to organize tasks, and to me also really prioritize. So there's so many things that we all have to get done in a day. How do you know which one is most important? And when you have executive functioning challenges, what's so hard is you often don't know the difference between paying a bill that was due yesterday versus making a budget for next year. Like that they both feel maybe equally important, even though one of them actually has much more dire consequences if you don't do it. So that's a real crucial one in my mind. Task initiation, beginning tasks without procrastinating, being able to say, I want to get this done and getting it done. I don't even think I need to explain that one. I think most people feel the need to be able to initiate a task. Metacognition, which is self-monitoring. So being able to track and assess your own performance and behavior, I think is also a really crucial to know yourself, to know what your challenges are, to be able to name them and to see the ways that you edit yourself and edit your work. Another really crucial one. Time management, effectively meeting deadlines, managing time, getting to places on time. It's such a simple thing, but if you look at someone who has executive functioning challenges and someone who doesn't, if I ask someone who has strong executive functions, if I say you have a doctor's appointment at 3 p.m. in Midtown, which since I'm a New York-based person, and you live in Brooklyn, you're going to do a little labor on, okay, so if I take the train, it's going to be and now we have all kinds of fun Google Maps that tell us that's great. But historically, that wasn't even the case. So you had to do all this labor figuring it out. And then you go to put it in your calendar and you put a 3 o'clock appointment, but it's a 45-minute trip. And then you need 15 minutes to prepare. And oh my goodness, do I also need lunch? Like I need to have lunch and then I need to finish my project. Strong EF means that in anticipating that simple little doctor's appointment, all of those components are in there in your time management skills. When you don't have strong executive functions, you just put in 3 o'clock doctor's appointment. That's if you put it in your calendar because you imagine you'll remember it. And then you, of course, right, at the last minute check to see how long it's going to take because it's 30 minutes before and maybe you did or did not set an alarm. And then actually it's 45 minutes and actually you're late and actually you didn't eat or bring the paperwork or fill it out ahead of time. And then the trains take longer. So you can really see how crucial something like time management is in just a very simple daily task. And I just picked one teeny little thing. Okay, to keep going. Emotion regulation, same thing we talked about before. So that goes for adults too. We all have things that piss us off, but hopefully I want to be able to regulate myself and show up in the world in a way that actually mirrors who I want to be. And so that's a really important thing to think about across the board. Problem solving, I think I can leave that one there, and decision making, and then behavior regulation. So choosing, like if you have a long-term goal, that you do the short-term things that need to be done to meet that short-term goal. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory how all of those things can impact both a daily and long-term capacity to function well in life. And all of those I would consider executive functioning skills.
Now, when it comes to identifying potential challenges, what are some common signs that a child or teenager may be struggling with executive functioning skills? Are there specific behaviors or patterns that parents and educators should look out for?
Yeah. First of all, what's hard is that, and especially because of the fallout from the pandemic, their executive functioning, anyone can have challenges with executive functioning. If you get too tired, if you're sick, if you have a really stressful day, even the people with the strongest executive functions are going to struggle in those moments. So I just want to say that what we're really looking for when we look for challenges and obstacles that actually are meaningful around executive functioning difficulties that are long-standing problems that want to be addressed, it's that this doesn't ebb and flow. It really is a consistent problem. And that if we think about a developmental, just a bell curve, that there's outside of the developmental norms for that period. And also you want to see it in multiple environments. It's not just that you're having trouble with managing your time at home, but you're also having trouble managing your time at work or at school. So we want to make sure that there's a consistency internally, that it's not just environment specific to know. But the ones that really rise up to me are inattention and focus issues. So now everyone's more distracted now, but if I tell you to put away your phone and to pull out your notebook and you can't attend to the stuff on the page for more than a couple of minutes without getting distracted by like the person's pencil tapping next to you, that certainly sends a message around a particular challenge. So inattention and focus issues are certainly to be paid attention to. Poor organization and planning, right? There's not just messiness and like backpack craziness, but also trouble planning tasks and that kind of last minute rush that almost feels every single time it's the first time it's happening. You're like, but didn't we talk about that last time? And there's a challenge in growing and learning from that thing. So that's another one. As we talked about time management issues, so difficulty estimating time, always running late is a good one, but also just procrastinating and thinking that will only take me 5 minutes and that's a 5-hour task. So the sort of not holding in mind and learning from those time management challenges that you've had and really internalizing them to do it differently. Some impulsivity. So I was just doing a professional development at a private school and we were talking to the lower school, even though these change across different environments, there's for something I would call verbal bursting, which is like impulsively communicating. And you can see that in adults, you can see that the interrupting, but with kids, it can also almost seem socially appropriate. Oh, I have a question. Oh, I have a question. But is the question relevant? Is it what we were talking about? And why are you asking 7 questions and the other child's only asking 1? Those kinds of impulsive issues are important notes. And also just trouble waiting, disproportionate trouble waiting. A subtler one that I think some people often miss is an inflexibility in thinking. So there's a rigidity in problem solving or a difficulty adapting to change. A really simple example of this is when you change something simple in a routine. Like it's, oh, like soccer isn't on Saturday this week. It's on Tuesday. And it's like, Tuesday? I'm not doing soccer on Tuesday. What are you talking about? And Tuesday comes and I don't even know how to prepare for soccer because it's now on Tuesday. So it becomes a totally different situation because small things have changed. And then if we talk about working memory, again, we have forgetfulness. I just gave an example of the server at a restaurant taking everything, not needing to take anything down. But what about the server at the restaurant who's staring at you being like, wait, say that again? Did you say ketchup? Did you say French fry? Wait, say Diet Coke. And even in that small interaction, you're seeing an inability to hold the information in mind and play with it in a new way. So that kind of forgetfulness and working memory, like forgetting instructions, losing track of things, also a problem. Poor emotion regulation is also a part of this, struggling to initiate tasks. Actually, another interesting one is some difficulty reading social cues because you need to have that metacognition. You need to be able to see yourself interacting. And in order to have a good social interaction, and there's also comorbidity, which is like overlapping with other diagnostic profiles and challenges in this space. But this version of it with executive functioning is that you're not attending to the other person in the same way. You might be looking at you and nodding, but I'm also thinking about what I'm doing after school or what I'm going to eat. And so whatever you're saying is not really important. So you might just say somebody passed away, and I'm like, and you're looking at me like, why am I not getting the interaction that I expected or the reaction I expected? And it's because I wasn't really paying attention to you. So that's the missing of the social cues. And there's also a visual spatial component of that. It's just like how much information I can take in visually that's important. So all this, you can imagine, it can be problematic for academic performance where it seems like somebody, particularly in school, can really comprehend information. They get it. They say it back to you. They understand it. But then it doesn't translate into sort of academic actual results. So they might not complete their homework or they get poor grades despite understanding it because they're asked to perform on a test and that's not actually how they learned it. So they can't spit it back in the same way. So you see some inconsistencies that feel confusing that when you have this list, you all of a sudden feel like, oh, wait a minute, that makes way more sense. I now get that.
Once these challenges are identified, what strategies or interventions have proven most effective in helping children and teens develop strong executive functioning skills? Could you share some practical tips or tools that parents and educators can implement?
Sure. To be fair, one of the things about running an executive functioning coaching company or helping people to get endless strategies, right? And they should all be customized and everyone has a different neurocognitive profile. And even if you said someone had relatively weak executive functions, we would hope that there would be a plan that would really think about their particular weaknesses because nobody looks exactly the same. But I will give some overarching strategies that I think are helpful for anybody. And that includes people who have strong executive functions, honestly. So I'm a huge believer in sort of organizational strategies, and that includes thinking about visual schedules, because when you look at something and actually big and bright and colorful, I think a calendar is a gift to everybody and that we should have a family calendar from as early as possible. And that helps kids orient a day, a time, a place for their things that they're doing. And I think that's very important because that's how our lives work. That's how we organize in our day, in our week, in our year. And when we skip that and don't help kids keep a calendar, we're actually really not setting them up for success in school. So that includes planning and organizing and working backward off routines. So really thinking about when things are due versus and when you're going to do them. So if you have a big paper due on Sunday to be on the family calendar, big paper due, and that way if grandma's birthday is Saturday, and you're out of town on Friday, that you know that you have to do things sooner. And without that kind of organizational strategy, it's very hard to hold that in mind for someone who has executive functioning challenges. And I think that when kids struggle to get out of the house or do things efficiently, having checklists that organize them, that have a visual representation, so not just do this verbally, but like a visual checklist with a word and a picture and a thing that they make synaptic success, like the feeling of getting it done and getting to check it, is all really important. So breaking things down step by step. So one of the most common things I see for parents when you send kids out the door is you say, get ready for school. There are 10 to 20 instructions embedded in get ready for school. And when many kids who have these kinds of executive functioning challenges, they don't hold those 20 things in mind. So when you say that, you get a ton of frustration and a ton of miss. And really what's so important is to make sure that you're spelling those things out until they're fully internalized and not leaping over that step. And that goes the same for even like color coding, notebooks, materials, folders. It helps organize and streamline and prioritize and in an internal way for people who can't do that naturally. I also think time management strategies are crucial. So using timers, I think visual timers, like a time timer where you can see things moving, not especially if you have time blindness, saying 5 more minutes, blah, 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 blah. It's like the Charlie Brown character. You really need to have time visualized and moving. So I think that's really important. And teaching time estimation, not just saying, when will you do that, but how long will it take and how do you know? Chunking tasks, not just saying, okay, you're going to write a paper, but saying, okay, is it the introduction of the paper you're doing? How long is that? How long will that take? Did you set an alarm for starting that? Because we know task initiation is hard. So really thinking about all those little things that even as adults we're just expected to do when we send a calendar invite with an alert, with our travel time colored in a particular way in our calendar. We want to really scaffold kids by doing that for them at first and then with them and then watching them do it to see if they could do it on their own. And then I think that right now in particular with screens, inhibitory control strategies like helping kids take a pause or a breath and being mindful is really important. So if they're in a fight with a friend, to say, do you want to send me that text before you send it to your friend? Or, oh, were you going to post that picture on social media? How about you wait till tomorrow? There's a real help around impulse control. Adults could probably use this strategy too, if we're being honest, right? If we're thinking about the way things go. And lastly, with cognitive flexibility strategies, it's a lot of perspective taking. So helping kids say, nobody wants to go do that. It's actually, why would you want to do that? What would your brother say? Trying to learn and practice other perspective taking and other ways to see problems solved really helps sort of internalize that kind of moving in the flexibility.
Now, for parents who are listening in who may feel frustrated or overwhelmed by their child's struggles with executive functioning, what advice or encouragement can you offer to them to navigate these challenges? How can they maintain a positive and supportive environment at home?
First of all, let me offer you genuine, authentic empathy, because I've been doing this work for 20 years, but I have a 16-year-old, and I really thought I was an expert in absolutely everything until I had a child with these challenges. I was like, I know how to do all of this stuff. I'm so good at it. And then my daughter came along and schooled me in all the ways in which I didn't know what I was doing and brought me to my knees in terms of my own frustration. So one of the things I would say that's challenging is there's all kinds of ways that we are matched or not matched with our own children. So if you're someone like me who has strong executive functions and you're matched with a child who has challenged executive functions, you'll find yourself in a lot of frustration of how come they can't just get out the door? What's so hard about time? And you really have to lean into your empathy and to not assuming that the things that come easily to you come easily for your child. So I was really schooled in that by my own child. And she would say things to me like, just because you can do it doesn't mean I can do it. And you need to stop thinking that I'm you. And that's a, okay, good point. And I really had to learn how to handle that differently and break it down differently. So I think being patient and empathic and asking really good questions of your kids of like, how can I support you better? What's hard for you? Trying to learn is really important. And then there's also the challenge of what if you have really challenged executive functions and then so does your kid? So you setting your own routines are hard. And then I think the most beautiful thing you can do is actually be doing that work with them and saying, I also struggle to make a structured routine. Let's see if we can do this together. Let's both use a visual checklist. Let's both set a timer. So we really want to help like move the needle and alongside them in a very collaborative way. And we really want to reinforce effort and not just results. So like a reward system, we really want to think about synaptic success. So we do things more right in our brains if we feel good about them and if we feel pleasure. So we want to make sure that if we're asking kids to do things, that we really are telling them how wonderful they are for giving it their best shot. And I also just, again, I want to really offer empathy. This is very frustrating. Like our systems in the world require us to be efficient, effective, time management experts and organizers. And when you have a child who struggles in these ways, it can feel very frustrating and upsetting. And like the world is against you and school is against you. And so I think being your child's advocate, but also being the patient, empathic person who can understand that is a complicated way to exist in this particular culture and society world is really useful. And I would just try and think about the sort of internalized experience of how hard it is to feel like everything is harder for you and to lean into that space and to remember that actually feeling good about yourself as a student and a person is always going to be much more important than getting the results that you're actually looking for. And I know that sounds like a pretty privileged stance, and it is. Also, I think that having, especially with the mental health concerns in adolescence right now, we can really see how crucial it is to help kids feel good about what they can do and not just be pointing out what's so hard for them.
Looking at the bigger picture, how do strong executive functioning skills influence a child's long-term success, not just academically, but in life as a whole? Can you discuss the potential long-term benefits of early intervention?
Sure. The research has really shown, just going what I was just talking about lower risk of anxiety and depression and improved coping with stress with strong executive functions. And you can imagine just in the way I'm talking about moving around the world that, in life, that having these skills really benefits you in your capacity to manage what's coming your way at all levels. It also has improved social emotional skills and resilience, self-esteem, increased self-advocacy, better long-term planning. And as someone, I also do couples therapy and family therapy work. And I think you can really think about that relationally as well, like our capacity to hold another person in mind, think about their needs, break things down in a shared life. How do you break down responsibilities? All of these things are really benefited by having strong executive functions, or at least an understanding of how to strengthen them.
As we navigate the modern landscape of education and childhood development, technology plays an increasingly pivotal role. This brings us to an important question. How does the use of technology and digital devices impact the development of executive functioning skills in children and teenagers? Are there any tools or systems that you recommend to either support or mitigate these effects?
Absolutely. There's a lot of impact. First of all, these screens are meant to be a distraction, right? They're meant to grab our attention. So we're having a constant attention grab. That's not the thing that we're supposed to be attending to. So on the negative side, we're really getting a lot of white noise that's being required to shut down differently than we did historically to focus our attention on the things that we're supposed to focus our attention on. Simultaneously, that same device is extremely organizing and when you use it as a tool. So I could not recommend more using iCal, alerts, timers, making sure that you have alarms set throughout your day for the things that you need to do, setting a timer on your phone. There's also lots of wonderful things like the app self-control where you can have the things that you're allowed to look at and not look at, and freedom. These are all things that are utilized apps to try to help you focus. There are lots of strengthening executive functioning apps for children right now that reward them for chores in different ways. My feeling about all of them is if it works for you, that's great. And if it doesn't, throw it away. They're all just possibilities. I don't think there's one size fits all model. I think it just depends on the particular kid and the system and also how effective you can be at implementation and consistency. So I think that, again, the positive impacts of technology, digital calendars, task management apps, timers, mindfulness apps. It's really helpful on things like Headspace and Calm to think, look, I got points for meditating. Routine and habit tracking apps and collaboration tools. But the negative impacts are really like decreased focus and attention, multitasking, distractions, overstimulation, screen time overuse, impulsive behaviors, and less practice with in-person communication. And also, I think like sleep deprivation is huge. I really like, and it should have this in the resource list, but parenting in the age of attention snatchers, which is a way of thinking about when you give kids phones, about having contracts with them, being really intentional about how we utilize devices, especially when kids are younger, being really focused on when you use do not disturb, not having phones in your room. And you reach a point in your life where no one's going to take away your phone. So you really have to work on empowering students to learn how to put their own phones away. So I'm a huge advocate of lock boxes, particularly ones with timers, and helping kids learn to put their own devices away, having family times where everybody puts their devices away, and thinking about this sort of positive reinforcement for times without screens, even though it's really challenging.
Shifting our focus a bit, how do executive functioning challenges manifest in children with special needs, such as ADHD or learning disabilities? What are a few concrete strategies parents and educators can implement to support executive functioning for these children?
ADHD is a very talked about diagnostic profile right now, and the rates have gone up. And part of having ADHD is having executive functioning challenges. You can have executive functioning challenges without having ADHD, but you can't have ADHD without having executive functioning challenges. Especially Barclay is one of the people who speaks most clearly about that. It's like that it is an executive functioning disorder in that way. And so everything I've said about executive functioning to thus far could be utilized in terms of thinking of ADHD. There's inattentive type and hyperactive type, and then there's mixed type, and there's different severity levels. So lots of things to think about in there, but really most important to me as a parent and as an educator is thinking about the manifestation of those challenges and thinking about how you customize an approach that really thinks about that particular kid's profile. So some of the things I've said are utilized in that kind of thinking about ADHD, but really that's where those daily visual schedules, timed work sessions, like countdowns, the Pomodoro technique, all those things become really important when you're dealing with kids who have those kinds of complex diagnostic profiles. Because the way to think about it is that they're not lazy. They're not choosing not to do it. They would if they could. Their brain isn't doing that synaptic connectivity. So you really need to scaffold them into it. And I think there's a misunderstanding about that is if you told kids how to do this or you give them the scaffolding that you're not benefiting them in the long run. It's actually not true. If kids don't need those skills, they won't use them. And we want to be looking for the growth edge of where they're uncomfortable, but growing in a positive way and can have success. If they don't, they feel like a failure. And if they feel like a failure, they don't want to do it again. So I think that the idea of scaffolding and bolstering monitoring is really important when you have these kinds of profiles. And just really being attentive to if kids are struggling to pay attention, put them in a place that has less distraction. Think about check-ins. Think about breaking things down into their component parts. Think about helping them highlight what's important and what the priorities are, not just assuming they'll understand. So it's also just leading with the empathy and really listening to those kids and figuring out what their profile tells you they're struggling most with by what you're seeing in the classroom or at home, and then doing that kind of intentional, thoughtful intervention that really meets them where they're at.
For our final question, what resources such as books, website, or programs would you recommend to parents who want to learn more about executive functioning and how to support their children in developing these essential skills?
Sure. I always find the websites really helpful. Understood.org is great. And actually can send a list. But I also mentioned Dr. Vivian Mujos' book, Action Potential, The Secrets of Super Learners, super short and easy read that really organizes around grit and growth mindset and executive functions as a real superpower. I think that ADD Etude, the ADHD Healthy Habits Handbook, is really great. I mentioned Palladino's book, Parenting in the Age of Attention Snatchers, which is a step-by-step guide to balancing your child's use of technology. It's the one I use for sort of digital thoughtfulness and executive functioning intersection. Barclay, 12 Principles for Raising a Child with ADHD, excellent. And then Organizational Skills Training for Children with ADHD, which is Gallagher, Abacoff, and Spira. Smart But Scattered, The Revolutionary Executive Skills Approach to Helping Child Reach Their Potential. I think some people, that's Dawson's book. I think some people find that really useful. Some people don't. I think all of these books have different pieces that you can grab at. But I think that if you're going to start somewhere, probably Barclay and Action Potential. And then for technology, Parenting in the Age of Attention Snatchers is where I would go.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. A huge thank you to Dr. Anna Levy Warren from Organizational Tutors for joining us and sharing great insights on executive functioning. If you enjoyed today's episode and learned something new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And don't forget to leave us a review. It helps others find this podcast and join the conversation. For more resources and tips on how to support your child's executive development, check out our show notes. We'll have links to helpful tools and, of course, more information about Dr. Anna Levy Warren's work. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you would like to speak to one of our experts, you can set up a complimentary strategy call with one of our enrollment counselors by following the link in our episode description. And for more information and access to additional resources, you can register for our webinars, which is also linked in the episode description. If you have any questions or would like to request a topic for a future episode, you can email me directly at jillian.yong, that's jillian.yong@ingeniusprep.com. Thank you for listening to another episode of Inside the Admissions Office, and don't forget to follow the podcast so you're notified every time a new episode is available. That is all for now, and I hope this was helpful for everybody tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.